Hey, hello my bookish beauties, and today I am making a what I've read recently video, and I'll be reviewing the books that I've read recently and giving you a bit of explanation and background to see if it's something that you'd be interested in reading yourself. First of all, I'm just going to start off with what I'm reading currently. I'm currently reading the Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This book has, as I previously mentioned in another video, very much surprised me. I'm really enjoying the magical elements of this book. I purchased this book because I read Caraval and I absolutely fell in love with Caraval, and I wanted more circus-esque books. I've seen quite a few people review this book and say that it was brilliant, so I just thought I would give it a little shot. I'm about 110 pages in at the moment. Yeah, as far as I can surmise of what I've read so far, it is this circus that randomly appears, and it's the most wonderful, miraculous circus that people have ever seen, and it's like, why is it there? How does it appear? And parallel to this story is two illusionists whom, well, she is an illusionist. He appears to be studying the whole background of magic and illusions, and they are both chosen to take part in this game by these other men that possess magic abilities, one of which is a stage illusionist who actually can perform magic, but he passes it off as stage illusions, and his daughter is the girl that he uses as his prodigy to take part in this game. And the other guy is just referred to as the man in the grey suit, and he takes this boy from an orphanage and raises him, and so he's supposed to take part in that side of the game. And apart from that, I really don't know too much more about this book, so I will be giving a full review and a full synopsis for you in a later video. The next book that I'm going to talk about that I've read is Orange Boy by Patrice Lawrence. Now, this book has been very highly pumped up in British YA book culture and teen books. As you can see, it won the Costa Book Award and the Waterstones Children Award book for older fiction. I gave this book either a 3 or a 4 stars. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The back to me initially suggested that this was a story of a boy who was being stalked for some reason, hunted. Oh, that's kind of true. That's not really what this book is about. This book is actually about gang violence and gang crime, and the main character, Marlon, who is quite a nerdy, quiet boy, initially goes on a date with this girl, and this is all in the first chapter, but whom unfortunately passes away, and he then goes on to investigate into her death and her background, because she's this really pretty popular girl, and it's like she was too cool for him. Why would she choose him? So he tries to find out more about it, but she gives him an ecstasy tablet as well and tries to give him the bag full of these ecstasy tablets while on this date, and he finds that very suspicious as well, so he gets involved in investigating more what happened to her, and it uncovers the past of his brother who is currently disabled after a car crash accident and is living in a care home. And the brother has all these connections still to, even though he knows very little about it because of the brain damage he's received, he knows little about his connections to past gang crimes. And then one of these leaders of a gang decides to hunt and taunt Marlon, and yeah, it's kind of like a mystery book where things are uncovered, but you know, it wasn't what I was expecting, but I actually really enjoyed it, and I did fly through this book because of how good I found it. Next book that I've read recently is Warcross by Marie Lu. This book was, I have to say, despite how gorgeous this book is, can we take a moment to appreciate how beautiful the hardback is? I mean, look underneath. I was so looking forward to this book because it had been so hyped up on BookTube, and unfortunately it had some downsides, I will have to say. I very nearly DNF'd this book after the first 100 pages because I mean, I don't know how many pages it is, I can't remember now. Yeah, out of a 353 page book, 100 pages of it, so a third of the book, didn't touch properly on any of the games in Warcross. I got told it had this sort of Hunger Game-esque vibe when you get into the actual games, and the kind of Ready Player One vibe. And it took such a long time to get to this point, and there was so much background explanation that I kind of was losing interest. When the action did get going and Amika reaches the other players and the games and gets involved in the Warcross ceremonies, it actually gets really, really interesting and really, really good. I do have to say that the romance in this book I felt was a little bit unnecessary. I mean, I get that she admired him, but yeah, I kind of feel like Hideo almost had this vibe that was kind of like her mentor, you know, in a sense, rather than her partner. And it did kind of come out of nowhere with him. It was like we knew all her thoughts and that she liked him, and there was no indication for the longest time that he had any feelings for her at all, and then all of a sudden he reveals that he likes her too. So, I mean, I thought that was a little bit random. I understand why there was the romance, because without getting that close to Hideo, you wouldn't have found out important information which is pertinent to the story's end. But yeah, I really felt that there was probably a better way of doing that. I gave this book, I think, about a 3 star. I will be reading Wildcard soon. In fact, I think in my next haul I have Wildcard coming, because I am actually invested enough to try and find out what happens with the story. I think I'm more invested in the sort of sub-characters than the main characters, because I think, you know, I think this could become quite divergent vibey now. So yeah. The next book that I'm going to talk about is Game of Thrones. I read Game of Thrones recently. As you can see, this is tabbed up to hell and back. I've had people ask me why it's all tabbed up like this. Each colour represents a character, because I actually want to do a video in the future giving some real in-depth synopses and explanation for my thoughts on this story, and it will unfortunately entail spoilers because the whole book itself has a lot of plot points that are constantly flowing out. so I can't really talk about it too much in depth in this video, as otherwise I will run a risk of ruining it for people. But yeah, so I've tabbed it up to have every colour as a character. So like Catelyn is orange, and yeah, Eddard is red. You know, it's just so that I can follow people's stories, because this story is set character perspective with all these stories running parallel to each other. Some of them overlap at different points during the book, but they are predominantly separate stories all going on alongside each other, which is why I want to be able to read through someone's stories, read through their perspectives, to give you my opinion on the character themselves. I do have to say, I did give this book, I believe, a 4 or 4.5 stars. I did really enjoy the story, but I am a little biased because I have watched the series, and the series is brilliant too, but this book is actually really good, and I was so surprised. I did have this recommended to me, and I have to say, I thought, I don't really read too much fantasy, especially not adult fantasy-esque books. Will I enjoy it? But this reads like a historical fiction / fantasy, because George R.R. Martin did want this to have a medieval vibe around it, and you can really tell it's very dark agey, and the book itself is quite dark in places, but the whole thing in general is very, very interesting. The only criticisms that I kind of had for this book, or the only downsides that I found, was well, I had 3 points why I didn't give it 5 stars. One of which is just a personal preference, and this was that I personally don't read much fantasy, so when it came to the in-depth explanation of fantasy elements, I did find it a little bit hard to follow, even though I do really like where everything's come from. The second point that I kind of found a little bit difficult, and other people have said this too, is the writing style, and this connects to my third point really, which is that there's a lot of descriptive writing throughout this book. When I say descriptive writing, I mean that there is a large focus on very, very minute detailing of building up a scene. You know, when they talk about like a person's armour in the book, it's very, very descriptive, and more descriptive so than when actually describing something that's happening to the characters. I'm more on the side of character-driven books. I like to be invested in characters, and I have to say though, whether it is the length of this book and the amount of times we go back to some characters, I was, and still am, so invested in these characters, and I really feel like in November I'll have to pick up the second book, because I really want to read more of this world. Yeah, it really gives you more than the series can, in a sense of, you know, enveloping yourself in that world. So yeah, I will probably be doing a more explaining the plot of that book and things in a future video, because I really don't want to spoil anything in this video. The next books that I have to talk about sorry, my camera just decided to stop recording. The next 2 books that I have to talk about, and the final 2 books I have to talk about, are these Karen M. Malice books. Now, if you've seen my Instagram, I have been taking a couple of pictures of these and hyping them up, and if you saw my Goodreads or would like to go and see my Goodreads, I'll put a link in the description below, but I hyped them up there too. I've been trying to convince so many people in my life to read these books because they are just brilliant. Now, I'm a sucker for thriller, but these hit the spot with me to a T. Now, this first book, One of Us is Lying, is, I believe that someone summarised this book as like the Breakfast Club if a murder happened. And I do think that is a brilliant way of putting this across. The way this book reads is with character perspectives and timestamps throughout, so you can see when and where things are happening, so you know if something is happening parallel or if something happens the next day. And the way I love these books read is that each person's perspective can leave you on a cliffhanger. So they'll be having a conversation or something is just about to happen, and then the next chapter perspective will start off on a completely different point. And you think, I always thought when reading it, I was like, are they really not going to tell me what just happened in that scene? And then they'll talk about it, like the next character will talk about it, and that to me really helped me understand how they were all interlocked, and you know, how they all had these separate experiences of the same situation, and I just loved that. So in this book, a boy called Simon, who has a blog, dies, and it is apparent that this boy has died from poisoning, and he was poisoned by giving an anaphylactic shock from peanut oil put in his drink. The only people in the room at the time were the other 4 characters who were in detention and the teacher. And so the police investigation then delves into these 4 characters. But as I mentioned previously, this Simon guy has a blog, and this blog is held throughout the school and about the people at the school. With this blog, he tells other students the gossip and the dirt of students, and he'll reference them by just their initials. And he was just about to release a story, 4 stories, all on one blog post about these characters, and that is why they are all suspects in the murder case. And I just thought this was absolutely brilliant. I fell in love with every single character. I know they have some bad traits, obviously, they've all done a bad thing, hence why he was going to write about them. But yeah, even the sub-characters in this book are quite gripping to be involved in, and I just loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. Fabulous. So what I was saving then to try and keep myself for the Halloween season, to keep myself another thriller on the go, was Two Can Keep a Secret. And I just couldn't help myself. I had to read this book because I'm waiting so impatiently for One of Us is Next, the sequel to One of Us is Lying. So I really wanted to sort of save this book, and I have to say I'm so glad I didn't, because this is for me even better than One of Us is Lying, and I thought One of Us is Lying was brilliant. Two Can Keep a Secret is about 2 twins who go to this small town after their mum is involved in an accident that is, I believe, prescription pill related. So she's had to go to rehab, and they have to go and live in the town where their mum grew up with their grandma. There's a lot of history in this town because their mum's sister, twin sister, went missing many years ago, and another girl went missing about 5 years ago. She was also like a pretty prom-esque girl, and then now they have returned, and from the moment they're there, all hell is let loose, and 3 girls are nominated for prom queen, of which our main character is one. Again, this is set with perspectives like this. So we have Ellery's chapters, but we don't have a twin brother. We actually have another boy, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because the guy perspective is, so sorry, here's his perspective, Malcolm. So Malcolm's perspectives are written because he is the brother of the guy who was the main murder suspect in the second murder, because he was the boyfriend of the girl who was murdered. So we follow 3 generations. We follow the mum's generation, their older tends to be brother and sisters, and then we follow the teen generation who are going through the prom experience themselves. So yeah, Malcolm's brother has been penalised around the town, and he has always been known as the brother of the guy who murdered that prom queen, that prom girl. So it's kind of like Riverdale-esque, I found this one to be, and quite complicated. So, but the thing is I read it over 2 days because I just couldn't put it down, so I was following it quite well. But yeah, basically Ellery is nominated prom queen, and then these threats come back saying that the person who murdered the past prom queens, not prom queens, sorry, I keep saying prom queens, who murdered the past girls is back, and they are targeting the 3 prom queens, and all these death threats keep appearing, and it's a small town village crime where Ellery and her brother and Malcolm and Malcolm's friend are all trying to find out what's happened. So I absolutely love this book too. And plus it is literally set around the season when I read it. It's set in like, I believe it's set 2019, but it's very much apt for the season, September, October time, which I was like, wow, that's kind of like adding to the mood and the vibe of when I read it. So yes, I hope you like this video, guys, and I would appreciate if you would like and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content soon. So I will see you in the next one. Bye!